Okay, welcome to the Othello walkthrough, Act 3, Scene 3, Part 1. So on stage we have Desdemona, Cassio and Emilia. And as you know from the previous scene, Cassio is really keen now to get Desdemona's attention and to ask her to push his case with Othello. Be thou assured, good Cassio, says Desdemona. So be sure, good Cassio, I will do all my abilities in thy behalf. I'll do everything I can for you and represent you to Othello. Emilia, good madam, do. I warrant it grieves my husband as if the case were his. You know, this is kind of obviously for the audience quite ironic again, that they know that it doesn't grieve Iago in the slightest. And it just shows you really, I suppose, how much Emilia is, I suppose, well, loyal to Iago. It's certainly true. Oh, that's an honest fellow, says Desdemona. Haha. Yeah, we know well. This is now, I don't know how many, I haven't counted how many times honest is used by this point to represent Iago, but as we know, I think even an audience hearing it for the first time would have picked up this pattern by this point. Don't doubt, Cassio, do not doubt, Cassio, but I will have my lord and you again as friendly as you were. Bounteous, madam. Bounteous, bounty, obviously, would just be another word really for generous. Whatever shall become of Michael Cassio, he's talking about himself in the third person, which of course is quite formal and I guess would be appropriate given that he's being super duper polite at this point. He's never anything but your true servant. I know it, says Desdemona. I thank you. And these sort of, you can see this is really quite formal address here. I know it, semicolon, I thank you, full stop. You do love my lord, and as I've said before, love here is a much more elastic term probably than it is in this day and age, really, in the sense that love kind of means, it means loyalty, it means that you truly care about someone. It can be love between people of the same sex without any other suggestion that it's romantic, all those kinds of things. You do love my lord. You've known him a long time. And be you well assured, he shall in strangeness stand no farther off than in a politic distance. So he will, appear like he's being distant from you, strange from you, as it were, but he's only going to do that for a politic distance, i.e. for show, so that everybody else thinks that he is still keeping Cassio at arm's length, because of course he has to, because as we already know, the person that Cassio hit in the fight was Montano, who carries quite a large reputation around with him, and Cyprus. We know that because it's been said several times. Aye, but lady, says Cassio, that policy, he's just playing really on the word politic here, politic, policy. So just going from the adjective to the noun, may either last so long, so it's either going to last for such a long time, or it's going to feed upon such a nice and waterish diet. So it's going to basically not have enough substance, I guess, of his loyalty, because the diet that it would be fed would, in his opinion, would be fed with evidence, if you like, of Cassio being a decent and useful officer if he were back in that role, or breed itself so out of circumstance. And that's just, quite sort of full on with the metaphors here, but it's basically say breed itself so out of circumstance, so that kind of it will become it will breed itself, so it will gather itself, it will generate a situation where that politic, that sort of pretend distance will actually become, I guess, a form of reality. Because I being absent and my place supplied, I'm away, my place is supplied, someone else is playing my role, taking my role as officer, and my general will forget my love and service. He'll forget what a loyal person I am. Well, don't doubt that, says Desdemona. Do not doubt that, she says. You don't have to worry about that. Before Emilia here, I will give thee warrant of thy place. I give thee warrant. Don't worry. I assure you that you're going to get your place. Assure you, he says, assure thee, if I do vow a friendship, So if she's saying, I am a friend, I am your friend, and I will perform it to the last article, I will do everything that a friend should do, right down to the finest detail. My lord shall never rest, my lord being Othello. He's never going to rest, and actually this becomes quite literal in the next line. I'll watch him tame, watch him, in other words, I'll come to keep him awake until I've got him tame, got him where I want him. I'll talk him out of patience. So I'll just talk him into the point where he can no longer stand it. His bed will seem a school. So he's like the lesson being, come on, it's time that you took Cassio back in. His board, this board at this case would be the table, like a supper table, dinner table, shall seem a shrift, which is a place where I think you do shriving, where you confess. In a sense, she now puts Othello in the position of somebody who ought to confess that they've done wrong. Quite interesting. So there's a bit of religious language coming in here, and there's more to come. I'll mix in everything he does, day by day, minute by minute, with Cassio's suit. Cassio's suit being Cassio's kind of justifiable attempts, his plea, if you like, to get his place back. So be merry, Cassio. Thy solicitor, that's Desdemona, shall rather die. Desdemona obviously being solicitor. In our modern sense we think of solicitor in terms of law, but here she's saying somebody who solicits, someone who represents you, if you like, in a particular case. I'll rather die. She's now talking about herself in the third person, just like Cassio did earlier, than give thy cause away, than kind of let his cause being to get himself back into his employment, lapse. On comes Othello and Iago. Now what's going to happen now? This is now one of the, I don't probably need to tell you this because you'll have studied it in class. It's one of the key moments where Iago first gets his hook into Othello. So watch for it here. Madam, here comes my lord, says Emilia. Madam, says Cassio to Desdemona, I'll take my leave, I'm off. Why? Stay and hear me speak. I'm about to kind of make the case for you. Madam, not now. I'm very ill at ease, unfit for my own purposes. It's kind of, he can't, I think it's the way I look at that, is he can't really kind of trust himself to be, to actually carry everything out in a nice, which he's trying to do, his purpose, in a nice, clear-headed way. Well, to your discretion, if you think it's the right thing and it's good to be discreet, then off you go. And off goes Cassio. Ha, says Iago, I like not that. What dost thou say, says Othello. Now I think this is quite interesting, because I think you will have already gathered, will you not, that a lot of this stuff here, which is all done in quite a flowery way between Desdemona and Cassio. She's got another person right there who's Emilia, and their relationship obviously is it's got to be fairly formal in public, and so it's Shakespeare kind of lays it on pretty thick. Look now at how simple the language becomes. I like not that. What dost thou say? I'll talk a little bit more later about the use of pronouns, but just to say that it is okay for a higher ranking person, that's Othello, to talk to a lower ranking person, Iago, using the familiar form of the second person pronoun thou and thee. Okay, thou being the subject and thee being when it's used as a pronoun at the end of a sentence. We don't have that distinction now, we just use you all the time. But in those days, a senior or a higher ranking person could use thou to a lower ranking person, and could also do the same to somebody they were close to. Likewise, a lower ranking person could use they or thou to somebody at their level, but they could not use thee or thou to somebody who's at a higher level. So you will never catch Iago using thou or thee to Othello at this point in the play, but you watch to see if there is a point at which he does use thee or thou. It's a really fascinating little kind of linguistic. I think it's probably almost certainly a deliberate ploy by Shakespeare to point up the power relationship between them. Nothing, my lord. Nothing, my lord. Or if, and this, even this tiny little dash here is in there for good dramatic purposes, isn't it? Or if, I know not what. So it's doing this wonderful kind of pulling Othello in by pretending not to be interested. And that, of course, as we know, tends to inflame your curiosity if somebody does something like that. Was not that Cassio parted from my wife, says Othello. Cassio, my lord? No, sure, I cannot think it, that he would steal away so guilty-like, so like a guilty person, seeing you coming. I barely even need to translate this bit. As you can see, the language is so simple, and you can talk about why that might be when you get an opportunity. I do believe 'twas he, and it just sits there, this. And you will notice later on that Othello, it must have made an impact. It's clearly made an impact. Shakespeare wants us to know that it's made an impact because Othello refers back to it later. So Desdemona, I think probably on stage, most of the time I've seen this, now gets his attention by saying, "How now, my lord? I've been talking with a suitor here." Now, suitor, you might know the use of suitor as in somebody who, usually a male, who is wanting to marry a female. Usually that's the way it's kind of most commonly used, I think. But a suitor here is just anybody who is bringing a suit, which you will know it's still used now in terms of law, and we've looked at it earlier on. You bring a legal suit, which is basically you can bring a case. A man that languishes in your displeasure. And you notice that she hasn't used his name just yet. I guess, in a sense, to kind of tease him into an opinion before she actually uses Cassio's name. Languishes would just basically mean has to kind of put up with something that is really unpleasant for a long period of time. In your displeasure, languishes, so he really kind of has to suffer at Othello's feelings of displeasure. "Who is it you mean?" says Othello. "Why, your lieutenant, Cassio." "Good my lord." Obviously sort of old-fashioned syntax, some of this stuff, yeah, sort of word order, my good lord, anyway, good my lord, doesn't matter. It means the same thing. If I have any grace or power to move you. So if I have any influence over you at all, his present reconciliation take. So be reconciled to him. In other words, take his reconciliation, take on board his attempts to be reconciled, which means kind of brought back into your favour. For if he be not one that truly loves you, if it's not the case that he's one that truly loves you and errs in ignorance and not in cunning, in other words, his mistake was not a deliberate one. It wasn't a cunning error. It wasn't a thoughtful error. There was no thought in it. I have no judgment in an honest face. I'm basically, I just can't spot someone who's decent. I've lost my touch, as it were. I prithee call him back. Please call him back. Well, went he hence now? Aye, sooth. Yes, yes, exactly what happened. So humbled, so kind of reduced, I guess, that he hath left part of his grief with me to suffer with him. So she's actually... She's really kind of using this sort of metaphorical language to reflect the feeling of pain and the feeling of suffering that Cassio has got at this point. And I'm going to pause that there, and I will see you in part 2.